Stephen Koonin knows a lot about the science, and he explains some of it in a piece just published in the New York Post. He is not a partisan. He is a theoretical physicist who served as the Undersecretary for Science at the U.S. Department of Energy in the Obama administration. And so we're grateful to have Stephen Koonin, a scientist, join us now to explain. Mr. Koonin, thanks so much for coming on. So
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
This is a very long conversation, and I hope that you'll join us in a longer form format at some point to really unpack it. But I just want to ask you about some of the claims that we hear most often, which is in relation to weather events. A hurricane will arise, out of the Caribbean. We'll have a heat wave. We'll have a cold snap. All of them are attributed reflexively to climate change. How certain can we be that climate change causes those events?
Well, Tucker, when you read the official reports from the UN and the U.S. government, you find some surprises. For example, even though the globe has warmed by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit over the last century, the incidence of heat waves across the 48 states is no greater now than it was in 1900, and the highest temperatures haven't gone up in 60 years. We have been able to find no detectable influence on hurricanes from humans. And the models that we use to predict future climates have become more uncertain even as they've become more sophisticated. So all of these things suggest that people who say that we've broken the climate and face certain doom unless we take drastic action are just misinformed about what the official reports actually say. I'm not the only person who knows that. It's right there in the reports, but it's sometimes buried. You got to go to page 780 something in the last National Climate Assessment to say that we've not been able to show that humans have an influence on hurricanes.
You've worked on this topic and in science more broadly your entire life. You remember the Obama administration. How frustrating is it for you to see science manipulated for political ends?
I think it's immoral in many ways, particularly when it's being used as a tool to scare young people, create depression, cause young people not to have children, and so on. We need to have an accurate portrayal of what we know and what we don't know, and then we can have the debate about what to do about it without using science as a weapon.
U.S. corporations are spending billions to reduce their so-called carbon footprints. President Biden's infrastructure plan is loaded with subsidies for green industries. In fact, if the new Green Deal ever was passed, it wouldn't be billions, it would be trillions. Our next guest questions the conventional wisdom on climate science and its impact on business and the U.S. economy. Stephen Koonin served as the chief scientist in the Obama Energy Department. Currently a professor at NYU and the author of Unsettled, What Climate Science Tells Us and What It Doesn't and Why It Matters. Is this a relatively new viewpoint that you have, Doctor? Because you spearheaded the Obama administration's efforts here. So I guess you have had a kind of an awakening or a re-examination of some of the science?
Yeah, Joe, about 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to look more deeply into the science. And in the intervening 7 years, I've come to believe that the science does not say what you think it says, to borrow a line from The Princess Bride. And everything that I've written in this book comes almost directly from the official UN and US government assessment reports. So this is not Steve talking, really, but it is the consensus science. It's just that these points and many others have not been brought forward into the public or political discussions. Well, humans are certainly influencing the climate, and human influences are growing as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere grows. But beyond a warming of about 2 degrees Fahrenheit over the last century, we don't see many impacts on severe weather events. For example, heat waves in the US are no more common today than they were in 1900. And they haven't gone up in 60 years. We have no detectable human influences on hurricanes. And global wildfires have declined by 25% since 2003, despite the terrible fires we saw in California and Australia in 2020. 2020 was one of the least active global fire years on record.
My name is Dimitri Kofinas, and you're listening to Hidden Forces, a podcast that helps investors, entrepreneurs, and everyday citizens get an edge by equipping themselves with the knowledge needed to anticipate the challenges and opportunities of tomorrow. If you ask people, independent of party affiliation, for their views on climate change and why they believe what they believe, most of them will struggle to give you a coherent answer. In fact, very few people, and this goes for politicians, journalists, and even academics, have actually read the reports put out by organizations like the IPCC and others responsible for doing the actual research that we all cite when we talk about, quote, the science. And I am as guilty on this as anyone. After all, why would I want to spend a minute of my time learning about exactly why we are so screwed? About how exactly we've destroyed the planet and, quote, broken the climate. I've read all the headlines: climate catastrophe, climate disaster, the earth is burning. But how true is that exactly? Are we really facing a climate apocalypse? Is climate science really, quote, more reliable than physics? Something that journalist David Wallace Wells said in a recent appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast? Not according to my guest, but more importantly, as he would say, not according to the science, which, to borrow from the book's title, is very much unsettled.
Everybody quotes the science. The President Biden, who is a fine leader, he keeps saying, it's the policy of my administration to listen to the science. And then you've got John Kerry, who said, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that the science is absolutely certain. And so you have various people like Bernie Sanders, Mark Carney, the former head of the Bank of England, Bill Gates, my good friend Ernie Moniz, who was Secretary of Energy in the second Obama administration. They're all talking words: existential threat, climate crisis, climate emergency, climate disaster. And in fact, when you actually read the literature and the reports, there is no support for that kind of hysteria at all. And the problem is that there is a long game of telephone that goes on, which starts with the peer-reviewed literature, the reports of the basic research written by scientists, for scientists, peer-reviewed. There is then the process of putting the assessment reports together, which can go on for a couple years, typically involve hundreds, if not thousands, of people contributing. They are a narrative, if you like, that are meant to convey things to non-experts. Then there are the summaries for policymakers of the assessment reports, which further distill the understanding down. And then finally you get to the media, which translate it for the general public. And, very few people actually read the assessment reports. And so there's ample opportunity for mischief along that chain of refining and filtering to spin things one way or the other. And in fact, if you look at certainly the media and the summaries for policymakers, there are a lot of things they don't tell you, or there are things that they misrepresent when you actually go read the assessment reports or even the underlying literature. And so that's what people mean by the science. And, my guess is that, I don't know for sure, but certainly Bernie Sanders, John Kerry, maybe even Bill Gates, I don't know, have not actually read the reports, let alone the underlying literature. So let me tell you some things that are in the report that might come as a surprise to many people who've only gotten their information from the media. And, these are direct quotes from the most recent UN report. We have low confidence regarding the sign of the trend in magnitude or frequency of floods on a global scale. We have low confidence in any global scale trend in droughts or dryness since the middle of the 20th century. We have low confidence in trends in small-scale severe weather phenomena like hail or thunderstorms. And we have low confidence in large-scale changes in the intensity of mid-latitude storms since 1900. And then you dig a little bit deeper into some of the other phenomena. U.S. heat waves are now no more common than they were at the beginning of the 20th century. and the warmest temperatures in the U.S. have not gone up in the past 50 years. Global wildfires have declined more than 25% since 2003, and the last year, 2020, was one of the least active years in the wildfire record. There's no detectable human impact on hurricanes over the past century. And the one that is in many ways a bottom line is that the net economic impact of warming of 3 degrees, which is twice the Paris goal, if it happened, would be minimal. And all of these statements are not Steve talking, but they are in fact exactly what's in the assessment reports or the recent quality peer-reviewed literature. So, the statement that we've already broken the climate is just not supported by the data.
Thanks for watching the Auto Channel. For more great coverage of all major motor events, visit theautochannel.com, the internet's most complete and comprehensive automotive resource.